Greetings, Internet. Didier here, and welcome to the first inaugural episode of the Porgs Nest Podcast. Did I pronounce that right? Is it Porg?
Yep, it is Porg.
So what we do here is, we believe that all porgs should be humanely harvested, field-dressed, marinated in garlic and soy sauce, and roasted to perfection. So we believe that here, and we are going to have a fun little podcast where we talk about Star Wars Unlimited, the card game, as everyone is so excited. I think no one was expecting how much this game took off as compared to previous Fantasy Flight games. What have you seen in your experience, Noah, with that?
A lot of people have just kind of written off the game thinking that it was going to be another Fantasy Flight flop, and it obviously blew it way out of the water. Like, so many people are playing this game, so many people want to play the game, and it's honestly kind of causing problems right now with stock.
It's very true, very true. So, without lack of an introduction, let's make sure everyone, hey, if you're watching this podcast, you care about our opinions, let's make sure you know what opinions you're getting. So we are co-hosting this podcast, myself, Didier with Random Number Gaming, and my friend here, Noah. I've met Noah several years ago when we were playing the Destiny Star Wars game. So why don't you just give us a little introduction to yourself, Noah, and why you care so much about Star Wars Unlimited.
So I'm Noah. I've always been a huge Star Wars fan. My dad had me watching the VHS tapes when I was 3 years old, and I burnt out his tapes. I watched them just so many times, and I have just ate up everything Star Wars since. Books, comics, movies, TV shows. I've played every single Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, except I think Armada. I haven't gotten into that, but X-Wing, Legion, Shatterpoint, Destiny, the old LCG, the deck building game, and now Unlimited. So I am really excited to be back in a new popular Star Wars game, and looking forward to pushing myself competitively this time.
Yeah, I've always been interested in Legion. That was a miniature game, right?
Yeah, it's still going. There's lots of fun stuff in that right now.
Okay. Yep. So really excited to have Noah on the podcast co-hosting here with me. My name, if you don't know me, my name is Didier. I run Random Number Gaming. I've been doing it since 2014. Originally, I created Random Number Gaming to put out Dragon Ball Z related content. So if you look back on my previous content, most of it is the Dragon Ball Z card game related. Then I got into Destiny, which I kind of jumped full force into competitively. I consider myself casual competitive or semi-competitive. For those Magic players out there who are really into Magic the Gathering, I am mostly a Johnny, I would say, with a sprinkle of Spike. I'm definitely partially Spike, and Johnnies, of course, they love their cool combo. They love like assembling their ultimate Exodia combo and then seeing it play out in games. So that's how I kind of approach games, I would say, is that I like putting certain cards together and seeing how they work in decks. I like making decks, making fun decks and things like that, but I also like testing those out in the competitive scene. And I guess my claim to fame in Destiny would be when I won the Toy Con, I think it was 2018 or 2019, 2017 maybe. We're going back years now, though. But for Star Wars Destiny, and that was in the POMAS meta. It was the POMAS meta for those Destiny players out there. I'm right now triggering. I'm like it's like core memory activated POMAS. But yeah, so, and what interesting about that tournament was I feel like Chewie Ray came in to solve the meta of POMAS because they were second winding and beating POMAS. And then I played Jabba Dooku, and I feel like I had an incredible matchup against Chewie Ray. I feel like my POMAS matchup was not that great. but it was like 60-40 in favor of Pomaz. But I feel like I had like an 80-20 against Chewy Ray. So it just so happens that my matchups aligned, and that I took the day. It was a pretty fun day. And I can't wait for the competitive scene to start in Star Wars Unlimited, for sure. So we've already.
Yeah, I'm really looking.
Yeah, Noah and I have already been going crazy in, for the just the casual stuff. Like, how many tournaments have you felt you played in so far, Noah, just casually?
Well, I did, I think like 4 or 5 in March, and so far in April, I'm up to 5 or 6, I think.
Yeah. It's we're just having a blast checking out the meta and seeing everything. I mean, I'm almost playing Star Wars Unlimited 3 to 4 times a week, going to different local game stores. I just can't get enough of it. It's so fun. We just love playing Sabine.
Yep, I've been grinding out Sabine. It fits my playstyle, but I have to admit I'm starting to get a little burnt out on it. But it is a fun deck. Not as fun to play against, though.
How many different ways can you tap your leader to do 1 damage?
3 at least.
All right. So we got a good cast set up for all of you. We have just so much hype has been happening with the set 2 spoilers. We've had 2 dev casts. One dev cast a few weeks ago that kind of, just really kind of briefly touched on some of the new mechanics that were coming out, and then the most recent dev cast kind of did more of a deep dive on some of the mechanics that we're going to be seeing in the new set, in the set 2. I can't remember the name of it. It's like Shadows something, Realm of Shadows.
Shadows of the Galaxy, I think.
Shadows of the Galaxy. All right, so we have 3 brand new mechanics. I don't want to call them keywords because I think only 2 of them are keywords, or 1 of them are keywords. But they're all new mechanics that are coming in, and that's going to be the topic of this cast. We're going to talk about the new mechanics, what we think about them, how we feel, what we're going to expect to see with the new mechanics. And then likewise, Noah and I are going to give our kind of, among the previews that we've seen so far, what we think are going to be the biggest splashes in the meta or the most impactful cards that have been released so far. So to start out here, the first mechanic that we're going to talk about is the capture mechanic. And the capture mechanic has probably, I think, received the least amount of previews related to capture. I was only able to find really 1 card that captures and then another card that interacts with the capture mechanic. So, and just to briefly describe what capture is, so the capture mechanic is going to be, you're going to put the captured card face down under whatever is capturing it, usually a unit, I would assume, until they leave play. So the example that we have is the Mandalorian rifle. You're going to attach the Mandalorian rifle to a friendly unit, and then when you play the Mandalorian rifle, you will, if it's attached to a Mandalorian, you can capture an exhausted non-leader unit. So pretty cool here. One of the things that I wanted to note about the capture mechanic is that it specifically says put the captured card and doesn't refer to a unit. So we might be seeing in the future interactions like being able to capture equipment. I mean, if you think about it, you could thematically, I could grab your lightsaber, right? I could capture in some way your equipment. So possible future interactions, like it doesn't reference units. I assume that most of the capturing we see will be units doing the capturing, which makes sense. But just,
another interesting thing is that there might be cards that capture from hand. So like a unit that when played capture a card from an opponent's hand at random.
Oh, okay. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, that would be cool. Yep. And this capture mechanic is very Magic the Gathering inspired. I think a lot of the mechanics of Star Wars Unlimited, and I think actually in one of the dev casts, the lead designer, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Do you remember? No, I'm sorry.
No, I don't.
Sorry. We'll get his name and add it in post. But no, the lead designer, I'm pretty sure actually mentioned about how many of the members on the Unlimited design team love Magic the Gathering. And I think he mentioned that he played Magic the Gathering as well. And that comes through in a lot of the mechanics, like you think about Ambush, you think about Overwhelm. A lot of these feel Magic inspired. And I think Capture goes right in there with that. You know, a lot of the white cards in Magic the Gathering had this. They didn't have a keyword associated, I'm pretty sure, but the mechanic is exactly the same. You would take the card, tuck it under whatever was capturing, quote unquote, and it would stay captured until that card left the field. So,
yeah, there's a couple other ones as well, like Hostage Taker, which is in red, I think, and I think Opportunistic Dragon, which is also in red. So. But yeah, there's a lot of different creatures and enchantments in Magic that basically have the same text.
Yep. So, really good. Hey, there's only so many mechanics that you could and ways you can interact with cards when you talk about a card game. So we would expect there to be some overlap, and there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Always good to take inspiration from other card games. As we saw with Unlimited, they took a lot of inspiration from Destiny, and we're glad that they did that because we all love Destiny, right? Except rolling dice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that the back and forth action economy made it over. I feel like that's a bit more interesting interaction wise than just you go, I go kind of turn structure.
Yeah, definitely. It adds a lot of nuance to the strategy. Just please don't print fast hands. I don't know what fast hands would do in this game. I just don't like it. Would be an upgrade that allowed you to attack with another unit. It would be basically Leia, I feel.
Yeah.
But
if they put Leia on an upgrade, that'll be a problem.
Yeah, please don't do that. All right. I'm glad we're in alignment on that. All right, so capture. Getting back to capture, thematically, I love this mechanic. I think it goes great because I'm always big. It's something I cared about in Dragon Ball Z. I loved when cards did a great job of representing the show, and I feel the same here. I think the capture mechanic is just a great representation of the Star Wars universe. There's so many capturing and rescuing missions that happen in Star Wars. I'm really happy to see it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and I just actually rewatched the episode 4. So, I mean, all of episode 4 is literally about capturing and rescuing.
Yep. I hope that we get a card that interacts with capturing that has like a title a little short for a stormtrooper or something.
Oh, that'd be really cool.
That'd be a fun.
Yeah, it's specific. Yeah, absolutely specific. They can do a lot of fun things with this mechanic, for sure. And another thing I wanted to note, mechanically, so there's always two ways you can look at a card or a mechanic or anything like that. Thematically, how true it is to the universe that it is, and then mechanically, like what role it fills in the game. And the role I think Capture is going to fill in this game is an interesting one. So you could call it soft removal, right? Because a hard removal would be like a vanquish or a takedown, where you're just defeating the unit off the field. You're just getting rid of that unit off the field. That's hard removal. You don't need to worry about that unit ever again, unless they recurred in some way. But then Capture is more of a soft removal, where you're just removing it temporarily, and then it may come back later. So it's kind of a way to give removal, but allow it to be a little bit more powerful, right? Because knowing that they could potentially get that unit back, and it's not gone forever. They can do a lot of interesting interactions where, for example, like the Mandalorian rifle, you may think that this is overpowered, and I think it's borderline. It is extremely powerful. But because you could potentially get that unit back, makes it a little bit more balanced. So it's interesting.
I also think that with the rifle, if it added to the unit's life, it would definitely be pushing the boundaries of its strength. But the fact that it only gives +3/+0 makes it so that you have to be really careful what you're putting it on. Otherwise, something can just get knocked out. Like, it would be some of the interesting things with it are, like, if you're running healing, because like the Mandalorians, the unit, which we'll get to later, doesn't have as big of a body, but the leader seems to. So, but I still think, like, it's going to be hard to play something like this because it specifically needs to go on the Mandalorian, and your opponent's going to know that.
Right. I think that's a great point that you just made about the rifle and how it probably is pretty balanced because it doesn't give HP, so it's not kind of protecting the capture part of it. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very big point for that. Yeah, great point. And I think the +3/+0 is a very common equipment stat line. We see that a lot on what is it, Luke's lightsaber and Vader's lightsaber. I think they might get +1 though. But just the heavy attack, I think the heavy focus on attack of equipment and not much HP, I think it makes sense. We do see more HP in the blue equipment, but I think that's definitely a great point. And then just wanted to mention also the other interaction that we've seen with capture, the unexpected escape. Makes sense that it's in blue. Blue's going to do a lot of feel. I think blue is kind of coming in as the heavy control color, that aspect. So it makes sense that they would be able to kind of free up and rescue your captured units, to have that little bit more control and say that they are going to govern, they are going to decide what happens on the field. They are the field controllers. So that makes sense.
An interesting thing about that as well is that it does exhaust a unit for 1. So even if you don't have something to rescue, you're still paying 1 to tap something.
Yeah.
Which is pretty big. And also, funnily enough, is you can play that and then play the Mandalorian's rifle for 4, basically, so that you capture something if you've already used your Mandalorian leader trigger.
Yep, very, very good points. And it's also not restricted to non-leader, so you can exhaust leaders for 1 resource. Mm-hmm. That late game could be something that you win the game with. Very, very good points there. So capture, really excited about it overall. I think we're going to see, hopefully see a more of it. I think it's going to be something that is going to be very specific to bounty hunters. I would expect that. So we might not see a crazy amount of capture in this set. It's also probably something that they want to be careful on because it could get a little out of hand if they print it on too many cards and make it too easy to capture your opponent's units. But we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, for the next mechanic that we have to go over, we have bounty. Very, very interesting here. So to describe what bounty is, it is when something has a bounty. This is a little confusing, so we're going to try to do our best to describe it. So when something has a bounty, it gains the text when this unit is defeated or captured, its opponent collects the bounty. So it's the best way to think about this is if I myself have a bounty, then you want to collect my bounty. So if I'm playing bounties on your units, then I am the opponent collecting that bounty. If that makes sense. I feel like I might have confused it more.
I'm interested in a rules clarification for multiplayer because, like in a 4-player Twin Suns game, does the person who defeated the unit, does the opponent that defeated the unit get it, or does every opponent get it? Because it just says your opponent.
Yeah. I think they mentioned that in the cast, if I remember, when they went over bounty. I think the first thing that you said is correct, that the opponent that defeats it gets it. They have a clarification for Twin Suns, I'm pretty sure, with this mechanic. They mentioned that.
I must have missed that.
Yep. So that's the best way to think about it. You know, when something has a bounty, I want to collect that bounty. You know, if my units have bounties, my opponent wants to collect that bounty. Thematically, it makes sense, but when you read the card, it can get a little confusing. So trying to do our best here to describe it. But one thing I do know is that one thing I know that I don't know is that this mechanic is kind of existed a little bit in Star Wars Destiny. And I know, Noah, you played Star Wars Destiny way longer than I did. I only played during the first 2 sets, but you continued on almost until the game ended, right?
Yeah, I stopped right before the last set dropped because it was limited supply and there wasn't really anything going on to play in. But yeah, there were bounties in I think set 4, and they were mostly niche, but there were a couple that were really strong. And it's really interesting to see them coming back for Unlimited.
Yeah, and of course the set 2 is very themed around bounty hunters and outlaws and Mandalorians. So they, as you know, characters in the Star Wars universe, they are very, very driven by that payday. You know, get that cash money. So it makes sense that bounties would come out in this set and just be very, you know, go along with all of the outlaws, trying to live their life and make ends meet, you know, in any way that you can. Yep. And so
to that point, the most popular bounty in Destiny gave you 4 resources when you defeated the opponent's leader that it was on.
Yeah. Now, and that's huge. In Destiny, it's a little different because if we look at Wanted, for example, right? Wanted has a very similar effect that Boba Fett has, where it's untapping or readying. I have to stop saying untapping. I'm sorry. I played Magic for like 10, 15 years, so it's hard to get out of that. All right, readying resources. So it's a little different because in Destiny, when you gain resources, you gain it on the top end, right? So like you could spend those resources to hit a drop that you wouldn't otherwise be able to hit that turn. Or like you could play a really, really, really big costed whatever, you know, 6, 7 resource or something like that. But Wanted is always going to be limited by the maximum number of resources that you actually have, because it's not allowing you to go above your curve, basically, just like Boba Fett. So it'll allow you to play more lower costed events or units, but not give you an extra advantage over your opponent playing a higher costed, above curve unit or something like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where something like Wanted slots in. I think maybe like a low to the ground, go wide strategy might like it, or even like Control might like it to just throw on something and then get the rebates when they play removal.
Yeah, I think there's two things I think that this card might see. One, I think if we get something that recurs bounties, which I think they actually mentioned as kind of a spoiler at the very end of the last devcast, they mentioned that there's going to be something in the game that's going to bring back bounties from the discard pile. So that's definitely noteworthy there, because then wanted becomes an on-demand, like when your hand lines up, right? Because that's always the question, right? You know, you don't want to necessarily wait to remove a unit. You don't want to necessarily like let that unit sit on the field just because you can't totally utilize the bounty, right? So like there may be a situation where you have all of your resources ready and you still want to take out that unit even though the bounty has absolutely no effect. So just something to consider. I also do think that Boba Fett could use this as well. If you double up on your power, because it's basically doubling up on your power, you could drop 2 pretty strong units. You could drop like 2 4 costs or like a 3 and a 5 or something like that, and really fill out the field. Like not even just play small units, but actually play like mid-game, like do a mid-game double drop, and that could be really strong.
Yeah, or you could live the dream and overwhelming barrage your I don't know, your TIE defender, and then kill 2 units, untap 1 with Boba, deploy Boba, attack with Boba, and kill the wanted, and then you can play 2 5 costs in the same turn.
There you go, and then you bring out your boss then.
Yep.
So whenever I build decks, I always try to say, you know, when your leader gives you something, you usually don't want to put that thing in your deck because you can depend on it from your leader. An example would be like Cassian. You have that card draw that you can depend on with Cassian, so you wouldn't really want to put extra card draw in your deck because you're kind of just doubling down on something that you wouldn't really need more of. But in Wanted's case, I think there is an argument to be made for the extra cheating, the extra readying of resources. It could get really powerful. So it's good to see that the cards that they're coming out with are going to obviously have synergy within the set, but also potentially have synergy with existing set 1 cards and leaders.
I also think that the putting the bounty keyword on existing units opens up an interesting design space, because like we see with Cartel Turncoat, it is way above curve in its stat line for a 1 cost, but that drawback of an opponent getting to draw a card off of the bounty is a really interesting way of balancing that.
Yep, definitely. I look at this and I think Luke Skywalker mill. Turn 1, you drop this thing down. You get to put a shield on it with Luke Skywalker with that extra resource, and then you can save it like until maybe it'll last until mid-game, where the card draw may matter a little less, not completely less, but a little less, and then, you know, as you push towards the end of the game, that card draw becomes damage, hopefully, in a perfect world where a mill deck exists. That's not Iden. But another thing that I would like to see with the capture mechanic is something traitorous-like. I think primarily we're going to be seeing a lot of... did I say capture? I meant bounty. Something else I want to see with the bounty mechanic is I think a lot of the bounties are going to reside in yellow. I think it makes sense. They're very tricky, and yellow is very tricky. So I think a lot of it... I mean, the 2 spoilers we've seen have been yellow. I think a lot of them is going to be in yellow. So I think it would be cool if we gave yellow something traitorous-like, not exactly traitorous, because traitorous should still be better, but something traitorous-like, just because thematically, you know, a lot of times when an outlaw has a bounty on them and you back them in a corner and you're about to collect that bounty, then that's when they start groveling and they say, I'll do whatever you want. I'll help you out, boss. You know, and so just thematically, I think it'd be really cool if there was some kind of a bounty that would maybe steal a 1 or a 2 cost unit or something like that, a damaged 1 or 2 cost unit, something. I don't know. Yeah, oh well, I guess
maybe one where it only triggers if you capture them.
Yeah.
And then instead of capturing them, they are under your control.
Oh, look at this. Fantasy Flight, get on the horn. Call us. I'll put a number in below. We're spitting straight fire ideas now. We know the set's already locked in, but seriously, it'd be really cool to see some of these effects. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of technical difficulty on my end, as is typical with podcast shooting. So expect to see more of that. But yeah, so continuing on here, we're going to now talk about the smuggle mechanic, which is probably the most interesting of the mechanics that are being introduced, because it allows you to play with it allows avenues of play that wouldn't otherwise be allowed for in this game at all, as the game stands now, which is playing from your resource pile. So just a brief introduction to what Smuggle is. It has the text, if this card is a resource, you may play it for its smuggle cost, and then you replace it with the top card of your deck. So it doesn't make you down one resource. You're playing a card from your resource pile for its smuggle cost, and then replacing that resource from the top of your deck. So really interesting here. A lot of abilities have potential with this. You know, I'm sure we'll be seeing this mechanic come through for the rest of the game. I think the big note with this is that it actually kind of is a way to generate you card advantage. It's not direct, like you're not drawing from the top of your deck, but what you're doing is you're trading the smuggle card for basically a resource. Like instead of drawing a card as you would expect from a card advantage card, you are making a card that you're going to play a resource. So that's pseudo card advantage. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll go ahead.
I think it's interesting that it also replaces with the top card of your deck. So with situations like Ezra or R2D2 or something, you can make sure that the top card of your deck is a smuggle card too, so you can smuggle into a smuggle and keep that card advantage going, basically.
Yep, that's actually another thing that they mentioned on the devcast, smuggling into smuggle. They joked about having an all smuggle deck and just being able to play your whole deck, essentially. Now, I think the big thing with that is Smuggle does come with attacks. It seems, based on the previews that we've gotten, that the Smuggle mechanic is about adding +2 to the resource cost of most cards. So while, yes, you can smuggle into Smuggle, it's going to cost you a lot to continuously smuggle like that. So...
Makes sense.
Yep. And then based on basically what you're doing with Smuggle, in my opinion, is you're trading a higher resource cost for card advantage. That's essentially what you're doing with Smuggle. So this, I think a lot of people are going crazy at some of the previews that we've seen with Smuggle. I think some of them are good, some of them are better than others, but I think that's the most important point with Smuggle, is that you're trading resources for card advantage, and the decks that you would expect to want to do that are decks that would play longer. As the game goes longer and longer, you're going to have more resources, and then that is when card advantage really would play a big role towards the later stages of the game, where you're severely limited on the number of cards you're playing, and you have a lot of resources that you could dump into a smuggle cost.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's a very interesting design. It reminds me a lot of the modal lands from Magic, where they were resources that either had a built-in cost to give you an effect, or they were a normal card that you could instead play as a resource in Magic. And a lot of those cards saw a lot of play in every format. So I expect that people will definitely be slotting these in because some of them are fine, but like making your resources a toolbox is a huge thing.
Yep.
Just being able to have a secondary hand of even 1 to 2 cards can make or break your end game.
Yeah, and that's why I do feel like this mechanic is going to be very limited. I don't think that they're going to print Smuggle on everything because of that toolbox that you're talking about. It gives you an insane amount of versatility. And if you think about sideboarding, like what you do in a best of 3, a lot of times what you do with the sideboard, not only you're trying to combat the matchup, but also you build your deck with a certain curve in mind. You build your deck with certain spikes, like, oh, I spike early game, I spike mid game, or I spike late game. Well, one of the things that you do with a sideboard is that you shift that spike. So in a matchup that you know that's going to last longer, you'll add cards that will help you spike later into the game to help you fight that matchup. So what Smuggle is going to do is it's going to allow you to play cards in your deck that's always going to let you have that late game spike. So it's gonna have this, like, it's gonna give you a lot of versatility in the way that you're building decks, because the Smuggle is gonna be, you can either play it from your hand at a reduced cost, or you can set it down to use later. So it's gonna have this, like you're saying, dual modal, and it's that effect that it has on the curve of your deck is gonna be very interesting in terms of deck building. Yeah, another thing I wanted to mention with Smuggle is interactions that it had with Han Solo. Han Solo is playing a lot from the resource line right now, playing resources from your hand mid-combat, playing resources from the top of your deck. So it has a lot of synergy with Smuggle. You're going to have 2 ways that you're playing resources from the top of your deck, potentially enabling that smuggling into Smuggle. So I think if there's a leader out there that likes smuggling into Smuggle, it might be Han, because not only is he enabling Smuggle in 2 different ways, but he's also giving you extra resources to pay for those Smuggle costs. So just interesting. We'll have to see how that develops, and if there's a Han Solo Smuggle deck out there that is going to rise to fame.
I love that theme-wise, too. Like, he's the primary smuggler character in the main Star Wars movies, so it makes sense that his leader ability just synergizes so well with the Smuggle keyword.
Yep, for sure. And then potentially there have been some, I don't know if this is confirmed or not, that there's a Lando leader coming. I would expect to see Lando being Smuggle themed. I hope he is, and I really hope that he's either playing. I think actually, Noah, you had an idea for what Lando was going to do. I think we talked about, right?
Yeah, I think he might have some kind of cost reduction for smuggling, or just let you. I don't think that he will add to your resource pile like Han does, but I think he might either like give cards a flat smuggle cost, or like have like a Boba like ability where the first time you play a smuggle card you get a resource back.
Yeah, really cool. Yep, and one of the things one of the things that I noticed in deck building, like you'll talk to people about how to deck build in Star Wars Unlimited, and one of the common arguments that is made is people will be like, well, if you don't need it, just resource it. And that argument, it's kind of funny to me, because you could say it about any card in the game, right? So to me, it almost makes it a moot point when it can be applied to everything. Why is that even an argument to begin with? Because quite literally, you could say that. Let's just fill your deck with 50 bad cards because you can resource them, right? So, but what Smuggle does, it actually makes that a real argument, because now that we can be playing cards from the resource line, you can just resource it becomes a functional choice. Just interesting, moving forward, I think we'll have to listen to that argument a little more moving forward with Smuggle in the game.
I do like having the resource decision simplified a little bit. So drawing into Like a timely intervention makes it feel a bit more like, oh, okay, I can just throw that in my resources right now and I don't have to think about it.
Yep, and I definitely wanted to talk about timely intervention specifically. We've also seen Vigilant Pursuit Craft. I think that is a very, I want to say underpowered card. For its stat line, for 3/5 Sentinel. Blue already has a 3/4 Sentinel for 4 in the in space. So, this one can be played for 7 with Smuggle. It seems like really, really taxing to get 1 HP for 7. It seems like a lot. So I don't really expect Vigilant Pursuit Craft to be in too many decks unless they were doing some combos with Smuggle specifically.
Yeah, it also doesn't have any good tags. Like, it's just vehicle and transport. It doesn't have Underworld or Fringe or anything that might have more synergy as sets go on.
Right. Yeah, but I feel like the forums and the world is on fire right now because of timely intervention. Everyone is I've heard some people say that it replaces ECL. I've heard some people say that every deck is going to play it because we see how strong ECL is. I just want to briefly talk about our opinions of this. So, one, it is definitely not going to replace ECL. The reason that, I'm glad you agree, Noah. The reason ECL is so busted is because you're playing something on curve. On 5, you're dropping Steadfast Battalion. On 4, you're dropping K2. On 3, you're playing that Star Viper to answer the threats in the air. So I think what we need to sit down and ask ourselves is how important is 1 turn in the game? Because timely intervention from your hand costs 1 resource, meaning it adds 1 resource cost to whatever you're playing. So you're playing it a turn late, essentially. If you play it early to mid game, you're playing whatever it is a turn late. So how important is 1 turn in this game? What do you think, Noah?
At least in Sabine, it is extremely important. It can make or break your entire game. But at the same time, for 1 resource, I can see certain play lines, like maybe your opponent drops a K2 and you're already behind on board, and maybe you just want to get that K2 out of the way, so you timely out an Echo Base Defender to kill the K2 right away, so you don't get hit with the K2 and then it die and you take the 3. But like, I don't know. I feel like it is honestly better in the late game where you can ambush out your K2 on turn 5 or 6 without spending the ECL, or if you already spent your ECL on a previous K2, or to get early board control, or to Steadfast Battalion. But I honestly don't see playing this from hand very often at all, because burning 2 cards from hand on 1 play is a really big risk.
Yeah.
In Sabine, because she's just going to run out of gas too fast.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about timely. I am glad that we got, because if you watched one of my previous videos where I talked about how ECL was busted, one of the things I mentioned in that video is there is no card in the game that does what ECL does. Well, I can't say that anymore. There is a card in the game that does what ECL does now. But I think the major point I want to talk about with timely is a concept called opportunity cost, and that is the cost that, like, hitting costs that come with just simply having a card in your deck or playing a card. And I think the big example that I have with this is a card that is busted with ECL is Fett's Fire Spray, because you ambush it and then it readies.
Mm-hmm.
So if you compare, if I play Fire Spray on 6, I get an attack on base, and then next turn I get another attack on base. If I timely Fire Spray on 7 with that +1, because that's what you would need to do, you get an ambush and then you ready. You're still getting the same number of attacks, but you're also using a card, and you're also limited by you have to ambush into a unit versus both of your attacks can go into base if you would just play the Fire Spray on the previous turn. So that's kind of what I mean when I say that, that extra turn matters so much. And you always have to think, what am I not playing, right? So if I smuggle timely for a K2 to make it 6 cost, what 6 cost am I not playing that I could have played otherwise? These are things that I try to think about when I talk about opportunity costs.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, in Sabine, I could potentially see running 2 if I had room, and only really using them as dedicated resources to smuggle later, like late game.
Yeah. Because
right now, the only 6-drop that's really effective in Sabine is the walker that I think it's like recovered ATRT or something like that. And that's only a 4/6. It has grit, but for the most part, in my experience, it's either hitting for 4 or it's dying. So I feel like you could justify paying 6 to ambush out a K2.
Yeah. Super late game for sure.
Yeah, but I don't think that's something, like, I don't know if I could really fit it in the deck. So
we'll have to see. I just don't think it's the hype level, like the whole replacing ECL, absolutely not. It belongs in every deck. No, I don't think, like, there are decks that just aren't going to get to that late game. And, with the examples that you're giving, I think it's going to be a great sideboard in aggro v aggro, because you do sometimes get to that hyper late game, and then, tempo matters so much in that matchup. So we'll have to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I can't imagine playing this on anything that costs more than 4.
Yeah. Yep. Ambush home 1 for 10. Let's go. Let's do it. All right. So to close out the cast, Noah and I wanted to talk about the big splash cards that we think are going to just the coolest, best cards that we saw so far. The one that I wanted to talk about was Razor Crest. I think this thing is just crazy strong. Amazing stat line for 4. Whenever I see Restore on a card, I always think it's kind of like damage. So whenever I see, like, for example, you look at Yoda. Yoda's a 2/4 with Restore 2. Just imagine if you dropped a 4/4 on 3, because it has Restore 2, and Restore is very similar to power. It's very similar to damage. So just consider that when you look at the stat line. Like, what if this guy was actually a 5/4 for 4? Because it kind of has that level of impact with the Restore 2, saving you damage. It is that powerful of an effect. I play with Restore a lot. It is that strong. Especially Restore 2 is very, very impactful. And then just the ability that this thing is going to have for equipment decks. The big thing with equipment decks now is they're risky. You could just get waylaid, or you could just get spot removaled, and then you are losing 2 cards. Well, this allows you to play more aggressively with equipment decks, recur those equipment that may have been lost earlier. I think just the presence of this card is going to be big, just again because a lot of times with equipment decks you have to play safe, and you can't be risky with equipment decks because you put yourself too far behind. But you can play more risky plays with equipment, knowing that you have this in your deck to recur them. So that's why I just think it's going to be a huge impact for those decks. So what do you think? What do you think about the Razor Crest, Noah?
I like it a lot. I think for 4, it is a very strong ship. It has the same body as the 4-drop Sentinel. It has the Mandalorian tag. It's a heroic aspect unit. Restore 2 is really strong as an aggro player. If I see Restore 2 on the board, I have to figure out how to get rid of that, because the 2 to 6 damage that you could potentially be taking off of your base can completely swing the game against me.
Very true.
Bouncing an upgrade from discard to your hand is really cool, and it synergizes with the bounties too. Like, you can play the 0 cost bounty, kill something, and then play Razor Crest with the 2 that you untapped, and like, you can play a 2-drop unit, kill the bounty, bounce the bounty back to your hand with Razor Crest. And then play it again. It has a whole lot of interesting combo potential, and graveyard recursion is always, or discard recursion is always really strong.
Absolutely. So can't wait to see this card slotted in decks. What did you pick for your top contender, Noah?
I really like the DL44. I can't remember what it's called. Hotshot. I think it's DL44 Hotshot Blaster.
Yeah.
It is a 1-drop that gives +2/+0. But if you smuggle it for 3 and a yellow, it's red normally, but the smuggle requires yellow. It lets you attack on when it's played with the unit that you play it on, and I think that is really interesting in so many ways, because not only is it a 1-drop upgrade that gives you more aggro, but it is potentially a 3-drop upgrade outside of its color.
Yep.
So it's the first card that we've had that actually changes its color. It's essentially a dual color card, and you are paying 2 more, but you get an extra effect. So like that 2 cost for that +2 cost for smuggling it, you're actually getting value out of it, because it makes itself better. You don't lose tempo off of it.
Right. And that's a big thing with equipment, right? Because you play the equipment and then you just kind of sit there and hope they don't answer it.
Yeah, because if you playing that blaster like turn 1 or 2, they're probably not going to kill the thing that you just put it on, or if you played around things well. But like playing it on 3 resources for something, like you want to keep that tempo going, and you don't want to see it. You don't want that. I spend an action and a resource, and then they just attack into my unit and make a favorable trade, or play a removal. So I'm very interested in that card.
Yeah.
Looking forward to trying to fit it in decks.
Yeah, I think a lot of decks are going to have that card. I think, in my personal opinion, it is the strongest Smuggle card that we've seen, just because of the versatility. You know, if you compare it to Surprise Strike, it's very similar, but except you get that, like, as the game lasts longer and longer, the blaster becomes better and better because it keeps adding damage, whereas Surprise Strike is a one-shot. There's just so many different things you can do with that card. I think it's amazing. I especially like it because it's such a low cost equipment. If we start to see equipment recursion being limited to say 1 or 2 costs, which I don't think we've seen yet, but if we see it, it's a very common theme in this game. That will be a prime target, and then you can then smuggle it for a little bit more of a cost. It's kind of a way to circumvent that, being that the card is so low costed on the card itself, on print. So
yep, and one cost equipment that is good. 1 cost upgrades that are good means that any leader in the future that synergizes well with upgrades is gonna want to look at that card, because like even like slotting it into the Mandalorian leader right now looks fantastic.
Yeah,
because for 3 resources to smuggle it, you immediately get to attack and tap down something on your opponent's side of the field.
Huge damage swing there, potential for sure. Yeah, so lots of interesting things. I love the new themes. I love just, seeing old themes brought up a little bit more. We are definitely going to be continuing this. The first episode of the Porgs Nest, we started out with our recipe for delicious roasted pork. But no, we'll continue on with everything. We're going to try to release episodes on Mondays. We will be doing at least bi-weekly. I would say we're going to shoot for bi-weekly, but when we have a lot of content, like during preview season or when there's a lot of hype for the next set in the game, we'll try to do weekly, although we can't 100% commit to weekly, but we will try our best to get out weekly episodes. But, if you liked, this podcast and like to get our opinions, please hit that subscribe button. And follow along for more episodes of the Porgs Nest podcast. Noah, final thoughts on everything that we just talked about?
I am really looking forward to the future of this game. It has started strong in spite of the supply shortage right now, but I have a feeling that it is going to only be uphill from here, or downhill from here. Yeah, that one.
Easier.
Yeah, it is only going to get better from here. I think I really am enjoying the design of this game, and I am really looking forward to playing this going forward.
Yep. So if you want more opinions from Star Wars lovers and competitive casual gamers, stay tuned for episode 2 of the Porgs Nest podcast, and we'll see you later.